It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, fellows. We've been observing the 2020 election unfold since we started Fromm and Fuller 5 months ago. And it seems to me that our spy audience is ready for your predictions in advance of next Tuesday's vote. And let's start with the presidential race and perhaps provide us with a predicted winner, but with some insight into your logic or methodology and how you got to that answer. Al, can we start with you, please?
I'm going to surprise people and say that I think Biden's going to win the election by, I'd say, a margin of 8 to 10 points. I'd say a 55% vote for Biden. I want to say that the only caveat I have on that prediction is there was a story that I just saw in the Washington Post this morning talking about how many mail ballots hadn't been returned, and sort of I worry about the sabotage by the post office. But if assuming that in the end it's a fair election, I think it'll be about an 8 to 10 point Biden win. How did I get to that? I think the most important number that told me that was, first of all, the race has been remarkably stable all year. I went back and looked at the 538 average polling average, and it was 8.8% Biden lead with a little bit over 50% on July 20th. Right before the debate, it was at 7. This morning, it was at 8.9, but Biden up at 51.8. The most important number to me is Trump's low ceiling. His approval rating basically has run in the low 40s to mid 40s, and he seems to have a ceiling of about 45 in any of the major polls. Last time he won with 46%. That won't do it this time because there aren't any third-party candidates to gobble up a lot of votes. As far as we can tell, the heavy early voting seems to reflect what has been said in the polls. Biden seems to have a substantial lead in a couple of states like Florida. It's declining a little bit as Trump voters start to go to the polls. But I just think it's going to be too big for Trump to cut on election day. The race, as I've said all year, has been a referendum on Trump. And as far as I can see, he's lost it on character. People don't think he's honest. He's lost it on performance, particularly his handling of the pandemic. He's lost it on policy. In some polls, he has a slight lead on the economy, but on every other major issue, including the dominant one, which is the virus, he's falling behind. He offers no vision at all for the future. Basically hadn't made an argument for why people should reelect him. He just screaming and yelling about Biden. Also the fundamentals of the race, particularly this explosion of coronavirus in the last week, really cut against Trump. He has, as I said, he has no closing argument. I mean, I think he seems unhinged as he runs around the country making all these charges. He's tried all year to make it a race about Biden, and every argument has failed. He was Sleepy Joe. They've used Hunter. They've talked about socialism, corruption, you name it. He's charged it, and it hasn't worked. Now, some people are nervous on my side that we might have a repeat of 2016. But as I look at that, there are a number of reasons that I don't think it will happen. The first and most important reason is Biden is liked. There was a CNN poll that was released late last night that had Biden's favorable at 55-42 positive. Trump was, I think, 43 42 or 43 positive. So that, you know, it's clear that the attacks on Biden haven't worked. Last time Trump won this election really among people who didn't like Hillary and didn't like Trump. I mean, Biden's 55-42 now. Hillary on election day last time was 43-53 negative. So that's it's almost a mirror opposite. And there were 18% of the voters who didn't like either candidate. And Trump won them overwhelmingly, about 6-4, 57-40. This time, they're just 4% of the voters who don't like both candidates. And it's not big enough to even get a reading on. You know, for all those reasons and the fact that the country is going, and most people think the country, about 2/3 think the country's going the wrong direction. Trump's in charge, even though he doesn't want to admit it. I just can't see anything changing in the last 5 days. And I suspect that Biden will win by 8 to 10 points.
Just to clarify, what constitutes a landslide?
Well, I consider what Craig Fuller did to me in 1980 a landslide, and that was 9 points, 50-41, with Anderson getting the rest.
Well, Craig, the White House announced that COVID was over, so I'm surprised that Al is so pessimistic about Trump's chances. What are your thoughts going into the last week?
Yeah, I find little to disagree with respect to Al's analysis. I guess I look at it and think there's also going to be a pretty wide margin of victory for Biden, although it does come down to getting the vote out. I know one of the disappointments that I saw on my side years ago was Romney, who the Romney team went into 2012 believing they had won. People were talking about what positions they were going to get, only to find out they had a fairly massive computer failure and didn't get the vote out. And so I think that that's about all that I could see Trump having left, which is why I think Trump is turned to a campaign totally focused on his base. He's there to energize them. He wants them to come to the polls. It looks and feels like this 70+ million vote that's now in is favors a Democrat, is largely a Democratic vote. But on the other hand, I know I have a whole lot of my friends who are not taking any chances, and they're voting early. I really think the election, and maybe my analysis is a little more simplistic, but I think this election for some time has hinged on people's view of how the president's handling the economy and the COVID virus. And on both counts, it's not been positive. There is a number out this morning that says that there has been a strong economic performance, but that's of course follows the worst performance I think in history, and it does not get us back to an economic level that we had prior to COVID. So there's still a long ways to go, and more importantly, while that number I'm sure will be touted for the next 5 days by the president, that number does not represent how millions and millions of Americans feel. Women who are out of work, people in the suburbs who are staying locked at home, unable to go to a job if they have a job. So it's not going to be some kind of October surprise that serves the president well. And while nationally, as Al suggested, these numbers have not changed a lot, in some of these states, the trend has been moving consistently for Biden. So, you have Wisconsin with a Biden large lead. You have him in Michigan and Iowa doing better than one would have expected. So for those reasons, I think I too see a pretty significant win for Biden. And you also have, he's run the clock out. He's on offense. He's going to places where he has a shot that he might not have thought he had 3 or 4 months ago, and he's going to places getting to even in some ways more interesting discussion. He's going to places where maybe he can pick up wins in the Senate to give him a Senate majority. So I think you have to look at the Biden campaign and the care with which it has been run in these most unusual times. And it turns out that the very thing he was most concerned and cautious about, the COVID virus, is now peaking, and the wisdom of his approach is quite evident to all voters. And he's I think done a pretty strong job of getting his vote to turn out early, and I suspect continue to turn out as people go to the polls in 5 days.
Well, the other thing that I wanted you all to comment on is the Senate races. You know, a year ago, no one really thought that the Democrats would have a chance of winning the majority in the Senate. Things seem to have changed a little bit. And staying with you, Craig, what's your predictions on the Senate races that we have coming up?
You know, I think there's better than even odds that the Democrats will control the Senate when all the votes are counted. I say, you know, even not counting the toss-ups, you look like you might could have even an even split if the if the Republicans won the toss-ups. But then, of course, if you have Kamala Harris as vice president, you've got her vote, so you'd have a majority in the Senate. But the toss-ups, you know, and the senators that are in trouble, Joni Ernst in Iowa, McSally in Arizona, Susan Collins in Maine, who has been struggling all along. These are tough races. I think one of the most interesting states, though, to me in this calculation is Georgia. Here's a state where, when you look at the survey that Al was talking about, the 538 survey, Trump was 2 months ago or so much stronger in Georgia. In fact, since the summer, there's been a continued decline in Trump and a rise in Biden, so that it's now rated as a toss-up. But to me, the most interesting thing is the trend. And with the issues that I think are most important, the economy and COVID not going well, and the trend clearly showing Biden's strength in a place like Georgia, you now have 2 Senate races because one's a special election. And in the special election, with Kelly Loeffler, it is presumed to be going into a runoff, just because it's not likely that anybody's going to get 50% of the vote. And now, in the seat with David Perdue, in addition to a Democratic challenger, there's a Libertarian, and that may go to a runoff. So you have 2 Senate seats that Republicans could have been, and probably should have put away in a state that was more strongly for Trump, where now at the top of the ticket, it's a real contest. I think one that Biden could well win. And it looks like these other races could go, the 2 Senate races could go into a special, into a runoff election. And time does not favor the Republicans here. There's nothing about the economy or the coronavirus that's going to get distinctly better. So the more time that runs, the tougher it is. And the one other state I would add that's interesting to me, and it's a possible Democratic pickup, is Lindsey Graham's seat in South Carolina. Now, it does lean in his favor, to be sure, but it slowly, his lead has been eroding over the course of the last few months. And if he wins, it'll be because the election's in 5 days. If this election was in 20 days, 30 days, I don't know that he could pull it out, because his margin has gone from August 54 to 51.6. Now he's got 44%. I'm sorry. Now he has. I'm sorry. I said that wrong. Let's start this again. So Graham in August had 54% versus his challenger 44%. Today he's down to 51.6. The challenger's up to 48.7, and it's trending against Graham. So I think Graham is in a difficult position. He may win because the election's in 5 days, but if it would go longer, I think he might lose. So again, in all these close races, it looks to me like, for Republicans' sake, this election can come none too soon. At the end of the day, it's hard for me to see Republicans holding on to the United States Senate.
Al, what are your predictions on this front?
Well, I'm with Craig. I think there's a very good chance the Democrats will win the Senate. I'd say probably with 52 or 53 seats. But there's one other point I want to make about what's happening. What's happening in some of these key swing states. Not all of these have Senate races, but because it's where most of the focus in the last 5 days is going to be, it probably will affect Senate races everywhere. This explosion of coronavirus is incredible. There was a on Axios this morning. They had a list of the increase in coronavirus cases over the last week. In Pennsylvania, most important state, it's 33%. In Wisconsin, it's 23%. In Michigan, it's 25%. In Florida, it's 21%. In Georgia, it's 20%. In Arizona, it's 16%. In Ohio, it's 22%. The only one that's reasonably under control is North Carolina with Roy Cooper, and that is at 6%. So in the places where everybody's going to be focused, the virus is out of control, which makes Trump a liability for his Senate candidates every time he goes in and does a rally. So I think, here's what I think on the Senate. And this is always very dangerous because when you sit, as Craig and I know, when you sit here in Annapolis or Washington or the Eastern Shore and you try to judge what's going on the ground in Georgia or South Carolina, it's not easy. We have the advantage of being able to talk to people who probably have a better feel, but I suspect that we start 53-47 Republican. I suspect they'll pick up the Alabama seat, so that'll make it 54. But I look for the Democrats to win in Arizona with Mark Kelly, Hickenlooper in Colorado. I think Susan Collins is going to lose in Maine. I think Cal Cunningham will survive his scandal and win in North Carolina. I suspect that Joni Ernst is in real trouble in Iowa, and Biden's going there, which can only help. I think one of the sleeper races will be Montana, where Governor Bullock will, I think he'll finally pull it out. That Georgia and Montana are among the states that Clinton turned in '92 and have basically been, Democrats haven't done very well since, but I just think that that conditions are such that this could be a year in Montana. I know a little bit about Montana politics. I think we'll win one of the Georgia seats, probably the Loeffler or the Perdue seat. The other one is almost certain to go to a runoff, and runoffs are hard for Democrats because you won't have the big turnout of a presidential. I agree that South Carolina, I guess I'd say we'll win one or two of the following five: South Carolina, Alaska, Kansas, Texas, or my surprise is Mississippi. I know it's a long haul, and it's probably just personal friendship with Mike Espy, but I've talked to Mike a lot, and basically he has to win 22% of the white vote. He's hanging in there about 20 or 21. If voters in the Memphis suburbs come out, SB could surprise because he's running against a terrible candidate. Hyde Smith is just a terrible candidate. So I guess in the end, I think it'll be 52-53 Democrats.
Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks so much. I'll see you after the election.